As you probably already know, this hurricane season likely will be hyperactive based on a lot of different factors, such as the fact that we're going to be entering a La Nina and the fact that we're also going to see ocean water temperatures that are much warmer than average. However, there could be one thing that could potentially save us from a hyperactive hurricane season, and we're going to determine if that will play a big role in terms of limiting the amount of tropical storms and hurricanes we're going to see. So that thing is the Saharan air layer, which pretty much is composed of the Saharan dust that flows over the Saharan desert and into the Atlantic, as it's typical for it to happen every hurricane season, especially early on once we see the westerly winds, the easterly winds push a lot of this Saharan dust towards the main development region. So that definitely helps limit the amount of tropical cyclones for several reasons. For one thing is that the Saharan air layer creates a temperature inversion. Since the Saharan dust is so warm, it's warmer than the moist air mass that's just below it, which prevents the moist air mass from being able to rise, because of course the cooler air mass sinks when it's surrounded by warmer air, and in this case the warmer air is the Saharan dust, while the cooler air mass is the moist environment right over the Atlantic. And another thing too is that when we see a pretty large blanket of Saharan dust move over the main development region, that prevents a lot of the short wave radiation from the sun from being able to radiate down on the ocean surface, which cools down the sea surface temperatures by the time we approach the hurricane season. So here's a forecast over the next several days regarding how the Saharan dust will play out, as we see that there is a light amount of Saharan dust moving through the Caribbean, but it doesn't seem like it's really going to get much thicker than what we're seeing right now, as it's a fairly light blanket relative to what we see. Of course, it likely will become a little bit thicker and more concentrated, the Saharan air layer, as we approach the hurricane season, more so into June, once the easterly winds really get going in the mid-levels. So we're definitely going to need to keep in mind of that. But we're going to take a look at what a big factor that will determine how thick the Saharan air layer will be, to determine if this could potentially save us from a hyperactive hurricane season by limiting the sea surface temperatures from rising to a very high rate by the time we approach a hurricane season. So the thing that we need to take a look at to determine how much Saharan dust will move over the main development region is a precipitation anomaly forecast for the Saharan desert area, or more so right around northern to Central Africa, because the thing that rain does is that the rain washes away a lot of the Saharan dust from the mid-levels of the atmosphere, because of course that water is able to absorb a lot of that dust and bring it towards the surface, which limits the amount of Saharan dust that's in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. And of course, when we see the Saharan dust a little bit more saturated, it becomes a bit heavier and a bit more difficult to carry the dust over a large area and into the mid-levels, like right over the main development region in this case. So take a look at the precipitation anomaly for the month of May. We are expecting to see a higher amount of precipitation than usual right over the east or the west central portion of Africa, and then headed into June and July and August. We clearly see the precipitation anomalies are expecting that we're going to see more rainfall than usual over the Saharan desert, which makes me believe that we're going to see less Saharan dust this hurricane season, and unfortunately that will mean that sea surface temperatures are less likely to cool down by the time we approach the August and September months, since there won't be as much Saharan dust that's able to absorb or block away that short wave radiation from hitting the ocean surface. And also the lack of Saharan dust will allow tropical cyclones to have an easier time to develop, since there isn't that temperature inversion in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. We're going to need to see if this changes, but this is a NMME model, which is a climatology model that combines a lot of the most reliable computer models into one model to give potentially the most reliable solution. It isn't perfect, of course, but it likely will give a good representation of what's to come for the next several months, and what it's expecting is more moisture than usual, which unfortunately I believe will contribute to less Saharan dust than what we typically see during the hurricane season. And when you combine that with the fact that we're going to be in a La Nina, and the sea surf temperatures, like I'm going to show you right now, are going to be much warmer than average over the main development region, I think it's just going to be a recipe for disaster, and could definitely be historic when it comes to the amount of storms that develop this hurricane season, as even the most conservative computer models and forecasters are expecting it to be well above average at the very minimum. But we have many forecasters also expecting that we're going to see more storms than even the record, which is quite insane because, as you know, as the record is from the hurricane season of 2020 where we saw 30 storms. So to exceed that would definitely be very concerning this hurricane season. And like I've been showing you in the past several hurricane season videos, look at the sea surf temperatures, much warmer than average in the area that's most prominent for tropical cyclone development, and this includes the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico as well, where of course the vast majority of the storm systems do develop at. And we do have a small area where the sea surf temperatures are actually cooler than normal, right over where the Bermuda Azores high is, and that's more concerning. And while you might think that it's not, that's good news that the sea surf temperatures are cooler than average in this area, in my opinion, I believe that that could be even more concerning. The fact that the sea surf temperatures are cooler over this area, because it is right where the Bermuda Azores high is located. And when we see cooler sea surf temperatures, that promotes less, or at least I should say more sinking air over this area, which means that the Bermuda Azores high will likely be stronger. And what that means is that more storm systems would be able to move further westward to impact the Caribbean as well as the United States and even Central America, with a stronger Bermuda Azores high thanks to a stronger amount of sinking motion we're seeing right here. So I believe that unfortunately will not only contribute to more storms than usual, but more tropical cyclones moving towards land, which of course means more landfalls overall. So you definitely need to pay close attention to that as you approach a hurricane season. And like I just showed you, with the fact that we're likely going to see less Saharan dust over the main development region thanks to a higher amount of precipitation over northern Africa, I don't believe these sea surf temperatures will cool down, and in fact it might accelerate when it comes to how much above average the ocean water temperatures will be, which is definitely very concerning. You definitely need to stay tuned this hurricane season pretty much all throughout the coast, even as far north as Canada, the northeast, because with a hurricane season this active, there's no limits to where exactly any tropical cyclone will move towards. So definitely stay tuned for more updates as we continue to monitor the hurricane season. So in terms of my forecast in general, whether the Saharan dust could potentially save us from a hyperactive hurricane season, and unfortunately it's not looking good. It's definitely very concerning that we're going to see higher precipitation than usual right over northern Africa, which I believe will limit the amount of Saharan dust, and that will allow the sun to be able to warm up the ocean temperatures in this area where tropical cyclones most prominently develop at. So I don't think that there's really anything that could save us from a hyperactive hurricane season based on all the factors we're seeing. We never know, of course, weather is very unpredictable, especially when we're talking about a long-term forecast, but all the factors just are pointing towards a hyperactive hurricane season, and hopefully we do see more Saharan dust, but it's not looking likely based on the factors we're seeing right now. So definitely stay tuned for more updates when it comes to hurricane season, but remember, whether more or less storms develop compared to what you're expecting than usual, all it takes is just one storm to completely devastate a community and change the lives of millions of people. So you don't want to underestimate the hurricane season if, let's say, the hurricane season doesn't produce as much storms as you expected. Because remember, guys, all it takes is one storm. So make sure, no matter what storm it is, or no matter how many storms develop, that you prepare the very same way if a hurricane or a tropical storm is expected to impact your area. But that's it for now, guys, and I thank you guys for watching.